All right, what am I doing here, Andrew? Did I mention I'm on medication after a
I know. I'm
few
trying
days
to be patient
of the
with
plague?
you.
I had the plague for a couple of days.
Well, that's not funny.
What am I doing?
Laughed. Oh, so we'll take.
Andrew's on medication too.
Yeah, exactly. Take two real quick, and then we'll talk with Professor Givens.
Who is on to? Who is this?
He wishes to remain anonymous, but he tried to call up yesterday when we were talking with Griffo and Brindisi about Nano.
I should have remained anonymous when I, everybody in radio picks fake names.
Yeah.
I should have done that. Like Bob Wellington. Hello, my name is Bob Wellington. No one would even know.
It's funny that you say that, and I've thought about that before, but
we
none
all
of
use
the
our
four
real
of us,
names.
all four of us use our real
idiots
names.
we are. Good morning, Bob Wellington. Good morning, Anonymous.
How are you, Mr. Keeler?
You want to talk on Nano?
My name could be is that I am a graduate student up at Suny IT currently.
Okay, all right.
And last week, and this kind of goes back to what Senator Griffo and Assemblyman Brindisi was discussing yesterday about the Nano Center. Last week, I was on the Suny IT campus, and I was walking past the new Nano Center building that, and
is that
I stopped.
Yeah.
I stopped and asked somebody standing outside the building what is essentially going on with this building, and all the person told me was that they have built it upon speculation, hoping that certain companies would take an interest. And hearing everything about the Nano Center coming to this area and this and that, it really surprised me.
So, and to be honest with you, I really think that answer does not come as to any surprise, because it really is what they would have done. It's kind of an if you build it, they will come situation.
Right.
Now, but they do have, we're told, there's a GE contract. Is it GE?
Yes.
GE.
Well, I had mentioned General Electric to them. And they said that is one of the companies that they are hoping to bring in. Well, and hoping is really the key statement here.
I think in part you're probably right. Although if you ask officials, which we'll speak with Tony Passetti coming in a few minutes, he's going to tell you that there are signed contracts, there are signed deals with GE and with the company from Austria, and that is happening now. The fact is, however, that, when the stock market started to shake a little bit a few months ago, I became a little worried that, if we ever had another crash, what would be the first thing that would be pulled? It'd be progress. It would be, we were going to do this, but because of the current climate, we're going to step away. So I think we're always it's always a gamble. Even with a contract signed, I believe it's always a gamble, right?
Well, in my opinion, I sometimes have this feeling that this hype that they're creating about Nano Utica is just
not real.
Strictly because an election year is coming up.
Well, no, that's not
for who?
Yeah,
for who?
Well, whether it be Cuomo or Griffo or
so can I just say one, because I've heard this before. I would be willing to buy into the argument that something could be orchestrated to make a governor look good. But if the governor's willing to spend millions and millions and millions of state dollars to get Joe Griffo reelected, to get Anthony Brindisi reelected, for what?
They're both running unopposed, but even the governor's not running. And here's what I would say to your theory. I'd like to offer my theory. Are you ready?
Sure.
It's somewhat sinister as well, depending on how you believe in politics. To me, and I've said this from the very beginning, this is about an election. This whole thing is about an election, and it's about the election of one person to an office that is not a gubernatorial office. It's not a Senate office or an assembly office or anything like that. This is about being elected to the presidency of the United States, and it's about Andrew Cuomo, which is a longer timeline. In order for Andrew Cuomo to run for president of the United States, which, by the way, could happen in 4 years, especially if a Republican gets into office. Mm-hmm. The only way Cuomo can run is if he takes Ohio and improves it and builds it back up to an area that is not impoverished. And oh, by the way, Ohio is upstate New York. It looks just like Ohio. If Cuomo can turn around Rochester, Buffalo, especially Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Rochester, Utica, Syracuse, Albany, if Binghamton, if Cuomo can turn this around, he looks like a genius, and he can run on, look at my upstate New York, which looks just like Ohio, elect me as your president, and I'll do the same for the country. So some of your theory, I think, has some, but in order for that to happen,
right,
it has to happen.
Exactly. He can't
That's the
say,
key.
He can't say in 5 years, they came 5 years ago
coming.
and pledged.
They're still coming.
We put all this money in, and there's nobody there.
For Cuomo to succeed, this has to happen. And that's why I believe it is all real. All right?
Well, perhaps your theory is valid.
We'll find out, though, won't we? Only history will tell.
Will.
All right, Anonymous, thanks for your call. Good luck
Thank
up
you.
there at SUNY Poly. Okay.
Thank you.
What do you think of that, Austin Givens? I mean, I know this is not your forte, but, that's my theory.
Well, good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
It's definitely an interesting theory, I would say. There are a lot of complex forces at work here, as you know, too, right? One of the more intriguing aspects to this whole story, I think, is the fact that, the construction of this facility on the SUNY IT campus is not happening in a vacuum. And so what's going to happen over time is that nanotech is going to continue to evolve, and it remains an open question whether these chips will be as in demand 5 years from now as they are right now. And so the clock is ticking. If this facility is going to be successful, then it seems to me that it needs to get underway and start producing fairly quickly.
That's interesting because Herkimer was really the tech valley back in the day. Back in the 60s and 70s, the village of Herkimer was at the forefront, and their chips were these cards with holes in them. Do you remember any of that?
Oh yeah, the old paper punch cards. Yeah. I remember them well. Yeah.
And what never happened there was a reinvention. So when the technology changed, they did not change with it, and they were just demolished. And so the same thing would have to happen here. You would hope that whatever we're doing here, we are very able to move very, very quickly to stay within the technology. I mean, I would think that's very, very important, right?
That's right. We live in a very competitive global marketplace. Technologies are changing all the time, and unfortunately, history is littered with tech companies and enterprises that have failed simply because they didn't keep up with the times. So it remains to be seen how this is going to go down, but like all Mohawk Valley residents, I'm optimistic that it'll provide a nice boost to the local economy and deliver some good jobs for us.
Okay, so let's talk, if we can, Apple. Who do you think was the winner, and is it over in this FBI battle?
This is a complex case. We actually ended up talking about it in a few of my classes. But just to remind listeners of the basics, so Syed Farouk was one of the two ISIS-inspired shooters in San Bernardino. He had an iPhone that was issued to him by his employer, the county there. And it was locked and encrypted, and the FBI was trying to get into it, so they asked Apple for help. Apple said no, and so they went to court. And in the end, an Israeli cybersecurity firm called Celebrate swooped in to help the FBI and was actually able to assist the FBI in cracking into the iPhone. Now, my position on this was kind of complex. On the one hand, I see this as a clear-cut terror investigation, and those are obviously very important. And on the other hand, this is an issue of what it is that the federal government can and cannot compel a private company to do. And to me, the second of those is the more important because really the FBI was asking Apple to write brand new software that it didn't want to write in order to get into this iPhone. And it seems to me that that's the sort of thing that goes directly against what the Founding Fathers were writing about centuries ago.
How can a government, well, let's ask that question. How can a government dictate a corporation write or change their business or in this case, write code? Well, really, when you look through history, there are plenty of governments that have, but not this government.
Well, that's right, and the whole idea behind separating the different branches of government and restricting their power is to prevent this kind of encroachment on private enterprise, private business, and private affairs. And so, despite the merits of the case, obviously this is extremely important. It's a dangerous terror investigation. The FBI wants to find out if there's sleeper cells in the United States, and that's all super important. But at the same time, we have to go about our business in a way that's true to our values, our laws, and the Constitution. And so my position from the outset was that that Apple should not comply. But in the end, it worked out in everyone's favor because Apple didn't have to do something that it did not want to do.
You know, we countless times, governments throughout history have used fear to take away rights, or fear to impose themselves upon their people, and in this case, on business. And our government is not immune to that by any means. You look at the SAFE Act, you look at the Patriot Act is what I'm talking about. After 9/11, many of our rights have really kind of eroded based on the fact that we would rather have a safe country than one that is completely free, and it really gets to a bit of a slippery slope there.
You know, the founding fathers were obviously far from perfect people, but they were very keen students of human nature, and they understood that humans try to grab power as fast as they can, and it's been that way forever. And so in drafting the Constitution, they sought to really restrict that ability. And as you say, Bill, throughout history, governments have slowly but surely tried to use fear, among other things, to force people to abrogate their rights, to force private parties to do things they don't want to do. Yeah. And so I think if we're true to that spirit of the Constitution when we're dealing with really complex issues like cybersecurity and like counterterrorism, we're going to be okay. But we can't let fear dominate our decision-making, because in the end, we'll lose for that.
Good stuff. We'll have you again here real soon, Austin. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
All right, Austin Givens over at Utica College. Quickly, Wayne, before I break on Nano, go ahead. I'll give you 15 seconds.
Okay, on the whole Nano thing, first of all, it's more of a semiconductor foundry, so it's the manufacturing facilities that are going in there. Well, let's call it a spade here. But I agree with you, Bill. Those, I feel very strongly there's signed agreements, or you wouldn't have this level of stuff in place. Mm-hmm. And the proof of the pudding of the Quad C building, GE is going in there. They're going in there to package their high-power switching stuff. Now, look at the $300 million that they've committed to this consortium to do that. So that's a marriage between Albany and Utica, where they're building the chips in Albany, and they're actually going to package them in that facility in Utica. Yeah. So their vision is coming true. Yeah. And there's a trip coming up, Bill, that you might want to be interested in. It's out to Hillsboro, Oregon, where IBM or Intel came to the table 15 years ago, and they now have $6 billion, or 20 years ago, $6 billion in annual revenue out of this cluster development. And this is a chance for people here to go out, the educators particularly, to see what that type of development looks like.
All right, I'm going to give it to Andrew. I want to know more about that. Interesting. Wayne, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Hold tight. We'll come right back. Tony Pacenti, County Executive, is next on WIBX.